We wanted to know what questions you had about the Christian faith. We're going to start talking about those specific questions here today on Midweek at the Compass. Hey everyone, welcome to Midweek. My name's Jake. Great to be here together with you again. Always love getting to do this. So we're just going to dive straight in. You know, about a month or so ago, we were walking through this sermon series called When in Doubt. And our senior pastor, Jeff Griffin, did a great job of laying out, this thing called apologetics. So trying to answer some core questions about the Christian faith. But we knew that wasn't all encompassing. So we wanted to ask you, what are some questions you have about Christianity? What can we maybe see if we can answer or have some further conversations about? And I got to let you all know, you knocked it out of the park. You asked some really good, really difficult questions. And we're going to start talking about some of them. So in the middle of this sermon series, one question came through online on the chat that I wanted to take a few moments to be able to walk through with you today. The question was simply this: can you be a Christian and believe in evolution? Ooh, I kind of wish I would have started with an easier topic to delve into. Or I was kind of hoping maybe you guys had some easier questions that you wanted to have a conversation around. But I also don't want to ignore it. So we're going to start here. Can you be a Christian and believe in evolution? Does the theory of evolution at all fit into a Christian worldview? And I got to be honest with you, it's complicated. So if you're joining in today and you're hoping that in the short 15 to 20 minutes that we have together that we are going to definitively prove one way or another this question, I want to let you know maybe you should just pass today. That's okay. I don't know that a situation like this or a conversation that's this complex really can be fully addressed, because people way smarter than me are having these conversations and not landing on the same page. But what I can say is that I want to at least start the dialogue, and I would love to continue the dialogue with you individually. So if you don't like where we land today, or if you have further questions, or you want to argue everything I say, you can make some comments in the comment section on YouTube or on Facebook here. But my hope and prayer is that you would be willing to have a conversation with me. So go to thecompass.net/compassonline, click the digital coffee button, and sign up to have a Zoom call with me. Let's chat further about this topic. You can let me know where I'm way off my rocker, or you can let me know if you have more questions, or you just want to further explore all this together. Let's do it. Let's have those conversations. But before we do that, I want to tell you one thing of where I'm going to try and pull information from, and that's Scripture. The Bible, I want to let you know, has history in it, but it's not a history book. There are scientific principles found in Scripture, but it's not a science book. There's poetry in here, but it's not a book of poetry. There is law, but it's not a book of law. The Bible, man, it's a love story. It's a redemption story. It's the story of God continuing to love his people and what that looks like and what it costs. Yeah, there are aspects of it that are all of these other things, but if we're looking at it to be the source of all history or all science or all law, we're going to be sadly mistaken. So here we go. What are the three views of evolution that we can discuss today? Well, the first one might seem a little bit easy for a Christian worldview, and it would just be that there is no evolution, that there is only creation. You know, a lot of times when we have this thought process, we're going to look to Genesis chapter 1 and 2 and the creation account of the world. And we'll use supporting verses like we might find in Psalm chapter 33, in verse 6, where it says, "By the word of the Lord the heavens were made." And it continues in verse 9 where it says, "For he spoke and it came to be." Or we pull passages out of Hebrew chapter 11 and we look in verse 3 where it says, "By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what is visible." So there's this view of creation where it's truly that out of nothing, everything was made by God. And that was church history for a very long time. Until the 1800s, really, when this guy named Charles Darwin rolled along. This is kind of a second view of the creation story on the origin of species, evolution, natural selection, right? It's this concept that ultimately we started as a single cell organism, and over the course of millions and billions of years, we've developed and evolved into these complicated multi-cell organisms. That there were these mutations that happened. And most of the time, mutation seems bad, but every once in a while, a mutation might be a good thing that increases the likelihood of survival for a species. And those seem to fly in the face of one another until a third theory came out. This third theory is called Theistic Evolution. And it more or less says that everything was created by God through Christ, including humans. But God ultimately uses what was created and is behind and woven in and intricately involved in the further development of all these different species. That could seem a little bit like trying to cherry pick the best of two different worlds, or it could truly be your worldview. So if we've got these three views of evolution, you can already see how it might be a little bit complicated to say whether you can be a Christian and believe in something outside of just explicit creation from nothing. So where do we start? Well, I want to go back to something Jeff Griffin talked about in an Explore God series where he was talking about the existence of God. And he talked about the teleological effect. So instead of me trying to rehash that, let's take a couple of seconds to see what he had to say about it.
You remember the watchmaker's hypothesis? If you were walking through the woods and you saw a pocket watch laying on the ground and picked it up, opened it up, saw all the gears were made just right to tell time, you wouldn't say, oh, I think it just, happened by chance. No, this brilliant design, a machine requires a machinist. A design requires a designer. This is called the teleological argument. This argument for design. And it's been one that's very powerful for me. Now, its popularity has waned due to this theory of evolution that Charles Darwin brought about. It's been thought by many that no longer be amazed at how, complex the human body is. As it turns out, this can happen by itself, all by chance with enough time. And I, have spent a lot of time studying evolution, the mechanism of evolution called natural selection. Can I remind you how it all works again? Natural selection says that genetic mutations happen. Sometimes things go wrong. And isn't it possible that every once in a while a mutation could be positive, actually help the organism? And if it helps the organism, it'd have an increased survival rate. It would pass on that new trait to its offspring, and you would find that trait becoming more prevalent in the population with time. And friends, I believe that Charles Darwin found something. I believe in natural selection. I believe in what I call, or what has been called, microevolution. And that is that this is a viable mechanism to explain how organisms can adapt to fit their ever-changing environment. One example would be the peppered moth. Maybe you recall this from your biology class. Charles Darwin found, these moths were in an area of pollution, and though the trees were largely white and they were largely white and very camouflaged, with pollution the trees started to get darker, and these white moths were standing out and the birds were getting them. Well, there was a mutation where something went wrong, and one of the moths turned out to be darker, and it actually was more camouflaged as a result, survived, passed on that mutation. Yeah, I buy it. I think that is evolution. Microevolution is a God-given mechanism by which organisms can change to better adapt to their environment. But I believe it is a gross overestimation of the mechanism of natural selection to say it is sufficient as an explanation how a bucket of dust over time can become a human being. It's just demanding way too much of a mechanism that it can explain little change, but not the creation of brilliant, intellectually complex machines like the human body.
I love the way Jeff laid all of that out for us. So what does that look like? What does it mean? Would I say that Jeff doesn't love Jesus because he ascribes to at least a form of evolution? He ascribes to the adaptation of species. He talked about it with the moths. I would never go that route because, quite frankly, I think I fall into those same views that Jeff holds. We've talked about it before. I was a chemistry major in college, so I lived in the world of science for a long time. I wanted to be a pharmacist forever, it seemed like. So everything that I was going was down the science route. I took a lot of science classes in high school. I took extra science and chemistry classes in college. Also, I could get these fancy, accreditation next to my diploma saying I took extra chemistry classes. I know I'm a bit of a dork. I still am. It's okay. But because of that, this question of evolution was something that was always at the forefront. It was always there. And I always wanted to try and prove the existence of God through science. I think science, when it's done well, should lend credence to God and an intelligent design. But I also need to say something additional here. I had a moment where, not audibly, but God spoke to me. He convicted me personally. And I want to ask you the same question that I feel like I was asked. Are we looking to science to prove God, or are we looking to Scripture to have faith in God? I really feel like God wanted me specifically to have faith in him. Hopefully that doesn't sound like a cop-out answer, but that's the process that I had to work through. I wanted to look at all of these outside sources, look at all of this research so I could be the one to crack the code, that I could be the one to definitively state that science proves the existence of God and here's why. But the more I kept going down that road, the more internally I was feeling like I didn't even need Scripture for God. I could look at all these other aspects to try and prove that he's there, that he loves me. And I think that was missing the point. 2 Timothy 3:16 says that all Scripture is God-breathed. It's living and active. And that same word, now, different language, New Testament in Greek, Old Testament in Hebrew, but that same word where it's talking about God-breathed, that's how it talks about how Adam came to be in Genesis. God breathed into Adam. So again, I would agree with Jeff that I would land on intelligent design in terms of humanity. Why do I say that? Because I think that man was made in the image of God and not developed into it. So ultimately, I would land on the fact that I think in species evolution is a thing. I think adaptation is a thing. I think it's been proven over the course of time that species can evolve. It can adapt. It can grow into something slightly different. But where I can't fully get behind is thinking that man wasn't made in God's image. I don't see it. Jeff talked about chromosomes later in that episode of Explore God. I'd encourage you to go to our YouTube channel. You can check more of it out. But with that, can you be a Christian and believe in evolution? Well, let me challenge you. What's Scripture say? Is Scripture silent on it, or is it speaking actively into it? Don't let science only form your worldview. Nothing should form our worldview except for God. He has revealed everything that we need to know about him and for godly living and what we have here in Scripture. I would love to know more. I would love to be able to sit down and answer all of these questions. Who shot JFK? Does evolution actually exist? All of those things I wish were just a little bit more explicitly laid out and clear, but they're not there. Why? Because they must not be crucial to us living a godly life. So when it comes to evolution, can you be a Christian and believe in evolution? Yes. But in the same breath, what is Scripture telling us? What worldview are we forming based on what it says? Are we apt to just try and think of these things on our own? Or are we going to continue to dissect to find out what the text was written like when it was originally written? what the geographic look of the area was when this was written, how it has been interpreted over the course of history. I would be naive to think that I am smarter than all of the people that have come before me and all of the people that will come after me. Ask my wife. She knows that I'm not. So yes, if we're talking about evolution in terms of adaptation, I think you can be a Christian and safely land the plane there. I personally would argue for intelligent design. Maybe that means you lean into the theistic evolution end of things. Maybe that's still not quite good enough for you and you're just explicitly out of nothing creation. Awesome. Have more of a conversation about it with me, with one another. Because guess what? Next time we're together, we're going to have to do just that. We just briefly and super high level skimmed Genesis in the creation account. But the next time we're together, we're going to have to go a little bit deeper in terms of what it does say and what it doesn't. Why are we going to have to do that? Because of you. I mean that in a really good way. Because guess what? You asked a question of how do dinosaurs fit into the biblical narrative? We don't see it anywhere explicitly laid out in Scripture, so did they exist? If they did, how? Let's talk about that next time on Midweek at the Compass.